I view Mr. Fethullah Gulen as somebody who is a very prominent world religious leader who has been very interested in dialogue between cultures and faiths, and that's something that is very important to me. Understanding of the Turkish government's campaign right now, the present party I guess one thing that was an interest to me in particular is I'm interested in healthy relationships between some evolution, as I understand, in terms of the movement toward a more of a My name is Keith Thompson. I'm a retired United Methodist pastor, retired in 10. Had contact with the Hizmet Movement in the year of '06 and went to Turkey. My wife, who was co-pastor, also we went to Turkey, sent by the Hizmet Movement in '07, and have been related ever since in terms of workshops and dialogue groups and so on. My views are very positive about the Hizmet Movement. I consider them to be really oriented towards world peace through interfaith dialogue and intercultural dialogue. They are what I guess as many times has been called moderate Islam, representing moderate Islam, and therefore my Christian religion is also moderate from the liberal point of view of Christianity. So the openness to dialogue is something that's been very important to me, and I've learned a lot about Islam through that dialogue. I view Mr. Fethullah Gulen as somebody who is a very prominent world religious leader who has been very interested in dialogue between cultures and faiths, and that's something that is very important to me. He has stood for openness and really an interest in the kind of ethics that go across religious lines and secular lines to create a world with more love and peace. And so I'm very positive about him and what he's accomplished in his life. I think that the emphasis in the movement on generosity, which is grounded in Fethullah Gulen's understanding of Islam, has been one major thing that has impacted the world. And the commitment of his followers throughout the world is an important way in which indirectly he has touched the world for the better. And I've always been very impressed with the local emphasis and control of the small groups that are located all over the world that kind of have their own self-government and choose their own service projects. And so there's a whole variety of ways, some of which I'm not very familiar with, in which this movement has resulted in a better world, especially in our world where there's so much hostile contact between, in the case of my religion and Fethullah Gulen's religion, between extreme forms of Christianity and Islam. And he represents a moderate way of interfaith dialogue and relating service to the world in terms of education and social outreach and charity that I think is very important. I guess the Hizmet movement to me is unique in terms of other social movements, Islamic social movements in the world, in that there's a real emphasis on religiously motivated service that has made the individuals related to the to this movement extremely generous people, people who are really at work in very concrete ways and wherever they are in the world to create a more just and peaceful world. I do think that the Hizmet movement is contributing to world peace in some very important and some very important ways, and some ways that are fairly unusual in terms of a religious community really supporting interfaith dialogue and intercultural dialogue, so that rather than there being a clash of civilizations, there's a notion in the Hizmet movement of the significance of our point in time as being a time of globalization, in a time in which peoples and cultures are coming into very close contact with each other in ways that that hasn't been the case in the past, and therefore it's very important for us to be open to people who are people in groups and religions that are very different from our own. I'm very much in favor of Muslims having dialogue with non-Muslims. I've had some problems finding Muslims who are willing to be in open dialogue in a deep way, in a way that listens as well as witnesses to one's own faith. And so that's something I think that's been very important to the Hizmet movement in my relationship with it. And that interfaith dialogue often doesn't go beyond the surface in my experience of interfaith dialogue with Jews, for example, or with other Christians who are from a different part of the theological spectrum than I am. Often the dialogue seems to have to stay on a superficial level so that there's not defensiveness and conflict that arises from it. And so the ability to share deeply one's own faith and witness to one's commitment to one's faith in combination with an openness to sit there or stand there and talk with somebody from another faith is, in my experience, something that's kind of rare, to the level especially that I've experienced with the Hizmet movement members have been willing to listen to what I consider to be pretty radical differences between my understanding of Christianity and their understanding of Islam. But there's been an openness and a non-defensiveness about that in my experience, is pretty unique. The Hizmet movement, one of the central features, as I understand it, is a commitment to education, and not just to religious education, but to what might be, for lack of a better term, be called secular education. In the name, I think, of Fethullah Gulen's understanding that knowledge, even secular knowledge and interfaith knowledge, is important for world peace. And the commitment to schools and to education that the Hizmet movement has, I think, is something that I value in it. And it's something that, as I asked questions and probed a little bit about the schools, I was surprised that they weren't more religious in nature. The schools themselves, the people who teach in the schools, are related to the Hizmet movement in terms of theology and Islamic faith, and it's their motivation for teaching and being educators, but that the schools are not directed toward proselytizing people who are non-Muslims to be Muslims, or even to certain kinds of understandings of Islam rather than the one the movement has, but is a real commitment to education in general. And that surprised me. I expected more of a situation like Roman Catholic Christian schools in this country, that if you are not a Roman Catholic and you go to that school, you're going to get some Roman Catholic education. And that doesn't happen in the Hizmet movement schools. And that was really surprising to me, and I had to probe a little bit to understand the whys and wherefores of that, because I think that's pretty unique in the world. I think that the Muslim-inspired movement, as Hizmet is, going to other countries and establishing schools for the purpose of education, and education in a general sense, and not just proselytizing education to be Muslim or a particular kind of Muslim, is a very important thing, and is a unique thing in terms of my experience. I really had to have long discussions with people in the Hizmet movement to get my head around that, because I think it's very unusual in the United States.
Quran has emphasized a lot of the time, learning and seeking knowledge, ilm and aql, all of these things are great emphasis in Islam. So I'm glad that Hizmet movement has taken one of its top priorities to pay attention to education.
I really feel like the Hizmet movement is one in terms of its outreach, and really a courageous outreach, it seems to me, into all different kinds of religions and governments and political parties and charitable groups.